everyone. Welcome to our first official video, I guess, on our YouTube channel. We're Kenley and Dylan. We're a married couple located out of Utah. We've been married for about a year and a half, and we just thought we would make this channel, share all our memories, experiences, all those fun things. We're excited to get the channel going a little bit more. We have a lot of fun ideas, but we're excited to get kicked off with this first video.
So for our first video, we decided to talk about our NICU experience, having our son Krew, just our experience with him. He was born 8 weeks early, so we had a different experience, and I think a lot of people just don't really know about the NICU and, you know, kind of what that's like and the treatments that they need. So we just wanted to talk about that, and a lot of people were interested in that, so we were doing that for our first vlog.
We get asked questions about our experience all the time, and we thought it'd be a good idea to have one of our first videos be us sharing our experience and talking a little bit about it. But I guess to start, we'll share sort of the story itself, the timeline of events, and as we talk about it, we'll have clips or pictures showing as well. I wake up on a Tuesday morning and I see Kenley up and moving around, and I was confused because she didn't have work until the afternoon, and she just casually mentions, "Oh, I think my water broke," and then just walks away. And I snapped awake, and long story short, we hurried off to the hospital. Her water had broke. They basically told us that where he was about 32 weeks, Kenley was 32 weeks pregnant, they wanted to try to delay the labor and delivery as much as possible just to let his lungs develop a little bit more. They gave a steroid of types to him through Kenley, which was supposed to help his lungs develop a little bit faster than they would normally. They would have liked to wait 2 weeks from then.
My water could have been broken for up to 2 weeks. So I could have been in labor for 2 weeks.
So we were kind of preparing for that. And in the meantime, they actually had one of the NICU nurses come in and talk to us, because they knew that no matter how soon from that day or how far from that day he was born, he would be in the NICU for at least a little bit. They took me on a tour of the NICU, so I got to check it out a little bit beforehand, see the rooms, yeah. And then that night, and these contractions got pretty strong, and so they gave her the epidural. And so she was able to fall asleep for just a little bit, get comfortable enough to sleep. The next morning, so about 24 hours after her water had broke, called the doctor. Things looked ready to go. So the doctor was able to hurry there and get there in time. And we went in for the delivery. They had it done in the operating room, even though we weren't going to do a C-section originally. They needed it to be in the OR room so they could get Krew directly into the NICU and basically check his vitals very quickly. They wanted to make sure his breathing was okay and all his vitals were okay. And then after about 2 hours, the doctor let us know, he's not going to be coming out. And so he basically let us know that the best next step would be doing a C-section. And so they got her prepped for a C-section, and that's how Krew was delivered, through C-section. He decided he didn't want us to film without him, so he started crying. So basically he was delivered, and they brought him right over into the sort of a room between the OR and the NICU where they can check the vitals, make sure they're all good. And they had asked me, they said, "Dad, do you want to come see him?" I was able to go in there and see him.
I was super tired. I pushed for 2.5 hours, and then I, had the C-section, and my epidural actually came out. So they had to give me another numbing in my spine. It's just like a spinal numbing. I'm not sure the medical term for it. They gave me that numbing, and then it made me kind of sick. So after I had him, super tired, and then I threw up, and then I just remember asking if I could go to sleep because I was so tired. I saw a picture of Krew. I made Dylan show me pictures. Memory's
all kind of a blur for Kenley, but basically after she was all done in the operating room, they still had him in sort of the in-between room, and they had a big window into that room. So they sort of wheeled Kenley's bed by that window. She was able to briefly see him from a distance a little bit. And then after she woke up, they were gonna bring us up to the recovery room, but they were also gonna bring us over to the NICU first. So they had him ready in there, situated in there, and they were able to wheel Kenley in, and she was able to, touch his feet, say hi a little bit from a distance, just while she was still laying down. Her body was still pretty numb, and she was still super tired, so she wasn't able to sit up much, just reach out, feel his little foot, say hi. And the interesting thing was, through all of this time, they had someone who was responsible the whole time directly just for watching his oxygen and making sure the flow was good and that he was getting it by hand type of thing.
His lungs were so frail and fragile that they had to manually pump oxygen for him.
After Kenley saw him for that first time, they wheeled us into the recovery room, and you remember a little bit more after that, right?
Yeah, so after I was in the recovery room, I think I slept for a little bit, and then it was like a few hours later, and like my parents came, so I got into a wheelchair that night. It was like later that night. I felt good enough to get up, and I wanted to go see him. So I got in a wheelchair, and then they kind of went over everything with the NICU, like how many visitors he could have. They told us that we could visit him anytime we wanted to. And they said, like, if the door was closed, just ask why and not go in, because a lot of times babies, especially premature babies, they can get very overstimulated. So sometimes when the door was closed, it was because he needed just it to be more like the womb, quiet and dark, and not anything that would make him stressed out. The nurse that was in the NICU, he walked us through all that, and we were able to have 2 visitors for each of us. So we chose our parents, so my parents and his parents, to see him. So none of our family, like our siblings or anybody, got to see him until he was home.
That first night, we got to really see him up close. And he had the whole oxygen tube on his face, though he also was under bilirubin lights because he was pretty jaundiced, so there were the blue lights on him, and because the lights were on him, they also had sort of an eye mask over his eyes protecting his sight. So really that first night we got to see him, we only got to lightly touch his skin a little bit and say hi. They were hopeful that the next day he wouldn't be on the lights as much. But then we got to the next day and got a little bit worse, and
things were just kind of declining and not where they wanted him to be. Sometimes when babies are born prematurely, they have to be in incubators. Luckily, he never had to have that. I think if it would have gotten worse than that night, then he would have been in an incubator. So before we went to see him that night, they told us that, hey, you can't touch him. You can come see him, you can't talk, and you can't touch him. And it's dark and quiet, and we walked in there and we couldn't say anything.
It was really hard being in there because we only had one day so far of being able to see him in person and
just a few
be
times
up close to him, and by one day I mean a couple 15-minute increment times where we were able to visit him while Kenley had the energy. That was very difficult for us to be there with him but not even be able to touch him because we hadn't had that opportunity very much so far.
From my perspective, when I was thinking about having him, especially as my first child, I was looking forward to skin and being able to hold him immediately. That's what you see in the movies, that's what you see online on social media, but I didn't get that, and that was really, really hard. And I think that night when he wasn't doing good and we saw, how much he was just fighting to breathe with that extra help of oxygen, we realized this is not gonna be easy. It's hard for me to think about that night because it was scary, and I was, feeling very, very far away from my baby and feeling like he wasn't my child because I hadn't even held him yet. I didn't get to hold him until a few days after he was born.
Day 3, Kenley was able to hold him for the first time, which was a big blessing because it was, it was right after that hard night, that second night where we weren't able to touch him at all. And
I think I held him for about an hour before his numbers started to show signs of some overstimulation, so I had to put him back.
Stress.
Yeah, the first week, couple weeks or so, he could only be held for an hour or 2 hours.
We feel very fortunate that we delivered at the hospital that we did because it was so close both to Kenley's family and to my family. It was a little bit further than where we live currently, but we figured that would be kind of worth it having family so close, and it really was, because instead of having to drive all the way down every day just to see him, we were able to stay with my family, which was, not even 2 minutes from the hospital.
Yeah.
And so my parents were very generous in letting us stay there the whole time. We stayed in just a spare bedroom there. And so we were able to be discharged just once Kenley was ready to go, even though he was still in the NICU. But yeah, so while we were in the NICU, like we said, he had to be connected to a lot of different wires and tubes. And so they had some days where he was under the blue lights and had the mask on and everything. And then for a while, it was about, I want to say 3 weeks of the time, the first 3 weeks, he had an entire oxygen mask on his face. So it completely covered up his nose. And then he had a feeding tube down his throat. And a little bit later, they were able to switch the oxygen to just smaller tubes that just little prongs that went up into his nose. So a little bit less oxygen flow is needed, but they were still getting a significant amount. And he still had that tube down his throat because he wasn't eating normally. They had to feed him through that tube. A little bit more time had passed. He was off oxygen a little bit more. They were able to actually move the feeding tube through his nose instead of down his throat. And so we were able to start trying to feed him normally. He also was able to continue developing his lungs on his own a little bit more, become more independent from that machine. Took us a while, but we finally were able to get into a decent schedule and flow with him each day.
So I'd go in at 7 or 10 a.m., come home, eat lunch for about an hour, have an hour or so to eat lunch, and then take a nap. Then I'd go back, feed him again, go home, sleep for 30 minutes, go back, feed him again, go home, have dinner, say hi to Dylan after he was done working. Dylan would most of the time come back with me at night, and then I'd feed him, and then we would go home and go to bed. So it was pretty miserable for me. I had a hard time finding things to keep me happy and positive and not just focus on him being in there. But we did try to do some fun things, just like watch a show together at night, and just to kind of distract us from our life, because it wasn't what we wanted it to be, and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It was nice to live with his family because I felt like I could get more of a distraction if I needed to from what was going on, and always having people to talk to right when we would come home from seeing him and telling them how he was doing, especially if it was a harder day.
Yeah.
So as far as him coming home, the criteria for him, because he was only on the lights for a little bit and a serious oxygen flow for a little bit, to where they said, okay, all we're waiting on for him, he's gaining weight, he's retaining the weight that he's gaining, and his lungs are good, but because babies can go home on oxygen for a little bit. So they said he can go home on oxygen. The last thing we're kind of waiting on is his eating. So he had to be able to eat by himself. He had the tube in his mouth, like Dylan explained before. Said he needs to go without that tube and be able to eat on his own for 3 days. So he would do like 1 day or 2 days, and then he would stop. He would be too tired. Or, he'd do good for like the whole day and then not eat at all on his own at night.
But then we were finally able to get him home after 41 days in the NICU. It felt like the longest 41 days of our life. That was the most exciting day I remember from all of this.
It really didn't feel real.
Yeah, it was kind of just a surreal feeling to be able to finally have him home with us and have a normal life with him. And so now we're home. He's about 4 months old now. We do have still some appointments and checkups we have to do with him, other than just the normal baby checkups.
Things, yeah.
We've had to do some heart scans for him, or meetings with the dietitian, make sure his growth is okay. He's still in the lower percentiles in terms of his length and his weight, but he is making good progress, and they're happy with the rate that he's growing. Even though it's a little bit lower than most babies, he is making the progress that they would like to see. He really is doing good. He's super happy and healthy now. He's a very curious baby. He loves to play. Yeah, very happy. Loves to talk to us. We didn't want to share this to get sympathy or make everyone feel bad for us. As hard as it was for us personally, we still feel very lucky and blessed, because we realize that we did have it a lot easier than most people have. And we are very fortunate that he is so healthy now, and that he was doing so good in his time in the NICU.
We didn't have any major complications to where we were worried for his life.
We feel very blessed that we're not in the situation that other people are in. And we just share this story because it is such a big part of our lives, and we want to be vulnerable with you all. We want to be able to share these personal parts of our life as much as we can, to an extent, of course, but it's just a big part of our lives now, and we have people asking about it all the time. So we thought we would make this video to share it with everyone. Again, it's not for sympathy or not to get you to feel bad for us, but just to share that part of our life.
Yeah, and just, we want people to know that, we're real people, and life is hard, and it's okay to be sad and to have these hard things happen, and to be angry and confused and stressed, but everything is okay, and he's good, and we're just super grateful for that. But it's a real life thing, and a real part of us that we'll always remember.
Yeah, we recognize that this is kind of a heavy video to start our channel off with. It's not the most fun topic, and it's a little bit it's a lot to take in, and it's a lot for us to share too. But it is such a big part of us, and we wanted to share it with you all. With our channel, we want to be ourselves. We want to be genuine, and we also want to have fun with it. So for future videos, we have a lot of fun ideas. They're not all going to be like this. We're going to just share our lives, share our fun memories. We have a lot of things planned. We're hoping to get some fun trips planned, even some fun collaborations maybe in the future. Yeah, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll post the link for our Instagram account in the description of this video. Well, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, make sure you're not missing any of our videos. We want to make sure you're able to tune